Next we'll move on to the workshop, a design build studio. In my case, I've gone through 3 workshops. This is my 3rd workshop. I've been in this workshop for almost 2 decades now. And it's not quite the same as when I began. It's a little busier now, but I've designed it with a lot of open space or clear space around both workbenches and some machinery. It's a 2-level workshop, and the original intent was to have machinery in the lower level with dust collection and a veneer press. The upper part was to be a hand tool workshop, and that's still the case today, much more so today actually than it was in the past. And I'll start to describe the ideal workshop and workflow and what you should strive for in your own workshop. This is one of my workbenches. I have 2 similar workbenches to this. I have a total of 4 workbenches. In the upper part, the hand tool workshop, and if you notice, the workbench itself is away from the wall, and this is something I advocate, having the workbench away from the wall so you can work on all 4 sides. These workbenches are designed for somebody or 2 people to work with at the same time, or work around it. They're symmetrically designed with similar features on both sides, the bench holes, and one side typically has a face vise and there's an end vise. But the workbench I'm standing in front of is exactly the same as the one in the you can see. So by having space around it, you can actually double the productivity of a typical workbench. Had it been placed against the wall, you would be limited to the front part of the workbench, the part that's actually where you're standing in front of. The back part typically becomes the storage part with the tool well. So from experience and talking to many other woodworkers over the past decades, this is what happens with a workbench when it's placed against the wall. It's more convenient sometimes if you don't have much space, but there's a huge disadvantage to having it against the wall. I do have 2 other workbenches. They're my former smaller workbenches, and they're against walls now, but I don't use them as much, anywhere near the amount that I use these workbenches. This is in the image, this is the workbench I'm currently standing in front of. And this is, you notice it's against the wall. It's about a few feet away from the wall, so I can work around it and access my tool cabinets. Also want to point out that I have some machinery in this upper hand tool area, but the machinery is placed in the corners. Smaller machinery, a drill press, a bandsaw, a router table. I have that placed in the corners. I don't use the router table as much, or nearly as much as I ever did in the past, but I use the drill press considerably, and I use the bandsaw quite a bit. I'll use the bandsaw before I use a table saw. The table saw is at the lower left corner, and that's centrally mounted with an outfeed table. I have some task lighting set up at the workbench, you can see. Another view of the other workbench you can barely see the outfeed table and one of the older workbenches along the wall. But that workbench is well away from the wall, well away from that router station. So it works well, so I can, with plenty of ambient lighting, so I don't need to turn on any auxiliary or any artificial lights or anything, ceiling lights, when I'm working there. Another view of the table saw, centrally mounted table saw with outfeed table and overhead blade guard, dust collection, and that very same workbench. This is an example of workflow where I have my machines against the walls, and I have my workbenches away from the walls, and the table saw centrally mounted, so I can have the most possible access around the table saw for larger pieces of wood, sheet goods, and that sort of thing. This is the very same workbench I'm standing in front of now, far less cluttered than it is today, because I'm not doing this lecture, but this is what it normally looks like. So I try to keep it clean at the top and try to store everything away. And you can see a small 6-inch jointer against the wall on one side, and that's an example of having machines against the wall. I tend to have all my smaller machines on this level, like against the wall, the periphery, so I free up the central part Because let's not forget that it's not just workbenches and machinery. When you're creating furniture, you need room to maneuver the furniture around, maneuver especially large case goods, cabinets. So I have a rolling cart, for example. I need plenty of room around machines to be able to work correctly. This is an example of a good workflow. These are one of two earlier workbenches. They're maybe 25, 26 years old. I still use them occasionally for some small work or metal work. They're on this level, they're against the wall. At one point these were my main workbenches and I had them placed together to create a larger work surface, but they were far too small for anything I do today. Another view of the workshop with the bandsaw in the corner. To strategically place some machines in corners and against walls to free up the central part of the workshop. The rolling cart you can see, and some wall cabinets that I've added over the years. The wall cabinets are strategically located in areas of the wall that I would never normally use. So in this case it's directly behind the bandsaw. So I have plenty of room to work with the bandsaw, and it's a space on the wall I would never use for anything else. Something to keep in mind when putting up wall cabinets so they don't interfere with your workflow. Again, you can see it's a little busier view of the same area with the bandsaw. That same wall cabinet just directly behind the bandsaw, and another wall cabinet just above the 13-inch thickness planer and just between two windows. That cabinet above the thickness planer is again strategically placed so that it doesn't interfere with the planer, but it's a wall space that I would never use for anything else. So it's ideal for a wall cabinet, and the door's open fine and everything. Another thing to consider if you're building your own workshop is to have higher ceilings. This is 9-foot ceiling as opposed to 8 feet. I could have gone to 10, but 9 was fine, so you can move boards around without hitting the ceiling, and have the lighting very close to the I wouldn't say flush, but just very tight to the ceiling also. The fluorescents you see here are set up in banks, so I can turn banks of lights on. I intend to upgrade these fluorescents once I run out of some extra fluorescent bulbs I purchased over the years. I will be converting them to LED fixtures. And if you're building today, you probably install LED fixtures. Fluorescents are totally out. This is the lower part. It looks busy, but it's just a view from the camera, from the image. But it's making the most efficient use of space. So I have two dust collection systems for different sets of machines. And the central dust collector is connected to the machines in the lower level. 15-inch thickness planer and a jointer, a thickness sander. You can see the veneering station with a pump, and I have a sharpening station just directly behind that with an oscillating spindle sander. So everything's strategically placed so I can do my rough work, my sharpening, and so I hardly do any handwork at this level. And the reason the shop's set up with an upper and a lower level was because at the time it was very expensive to build a workshop. I wasn't in the same financial position I am today. So having a smaller footprint was ideal. So having a shop on 2 levels with a smaller footprint was the ideal format. The total square footage of the workshop is about 1,300 square feet. So you can imagine having 650 square feet on 2 levels versus a 1,300 square foot shop, how much space saving there is. So it's actually taking advantage of a lower part of the building we live in also. This is another workbench that I built maybe 15 years ago. This is a more rugged, heavy mass workbench with a sliding board jack. I built it with primarily construction lumber and plywood tops, Baltic birch tops. They're just 2 tops glued together, and a series of bench holes and all that. So this served me well for a number of years, but I have outgrown this bench also. And, it's very large, and I decided to move that from the upper level to the lower level. So I use this as a lower level workbench when I'm working at the lower level and working with some hand tools. It has a metal vise with wooden jaws. So that's something that's really common today in workbenches also. Now, my current workbench is at the upper level, but this served well for a number of years, and I developed a set of bench aids for this workbench. Another view of that workbench, it's against the wall, and there's a little area to the left of it that has my wood storage, and a 15-inch thickness planer just ahead of it, and a more industrial, wider jointer. That's, I think, 9 1/4, 9.5 inches wide. It's an older machine from the 1950s that was restored somewhat, and it works. So I use that to prepare some boards, and then I break them down in this lower level so I can work with them above with the hand tools. This is a sliding miter station. I set this up to break down boards into manageable pieces so I could work with them by hand. So this is a quick way of doing that. And it's supposed to have been a portable station, but it's been there. I set it up and I have never taken it down because it's so handy. So I have plenty of light, ambient light at this lower level because it's actually a raised lower level. It's above ground by 4 to 5 feet. So it works well in my case. Here I am sitting in front of the same workbench I'm standing in front of now with these tool cabinets have been upgraded in the last year, and the doors are used to store some tools that you can see. Original doors were just doors, so I've done that. It's a little chisel rack there in the tool well. And the reason I use a chisel rack and I don't have them against the walls because I work on 2 different workbenches. I can move the chisel rack around and to where I'm working. So it's something to keep in mind. I mean, most people don't have the same setup I have with 2 similar workbenches. This is an adaptation, and to increase my workflow, to speed things up, is to actually be able to move things around between workbenches for me.